You're listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast, celebrating hunting dog heritage, competition, and community. United Kennel Club has been the hunting dog sports home for coonhounds, beagles, retrievers, pointers, cur, feist, and more for over 125 years.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. This is the Coonhound Program Manager at UKC, Trevor Wade, and I'm joined today by Director of Hunting Ops, Alan Gingrich. Alan, how's it going today?
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Yeah, we're kind of getting in the feel of this podcast stuff. We've done quite a few now. We've released quite a few and kind of enjoying it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we've had some fun ones. I've enjoyed doing all of them. We've had some different ones to cover. I've been involved in several different segments, Coonhounds with you, obviously, and then did some beagle ones, several beagle ones. Did one with Dominic on the hunting retriever stuff last week as well. So
yeah, good stuff.
Yeah,
I know we've been getting a lot of positive feedback from it, and that's the driving force behind it. Obviously, the main reason we're doing this is to get information out there to everybody, and the feedback after the episodes air is my favorite part of it. You know, I always welcome to feedback and hearing people, some different things to touch, and we're going to talk about rules today mainly, and a few of them are ones that people really wanted us to get out there, and I think that it's important, obviously, to spread information best we can about our rules. For sure.
I would mention a little bit, rules. We're talking about rules, and I love talking about rules. I think you do as well. And, but doing it in this form, we don't have something we can just go back. Like when you write something, you go back and proof it. But I know I've already caught myself listening to a couple of our rules podcasts. One was a beagle one I did and misspoke a little bit, and people pick up on that too. So, obviously, it just didn't come out the way I meant it to, and didn't even think about it when you said it, So sometimes hopefully people will consider that a little bit. And sometimes when we go back and listen to it, it's like, oh, God, I didn't say that quite right, but we try to get it right best we possibly can. So.
Kind of important to notate, I guess, that this isn't the end all be all for rules. Of course,
that's
you need to stay studied up on the rule books, and both of it in any of our events that you participate in, whether it's coonhounds or beagles, there's columns out there in the publications, and we publish those online as well for people to read, like the Coonhound Advisor column that's been going for many years now. That's just an extension of the rule book. So it's important to also stay up on that whenever you have opportunity to read it. Just an article a month.
For sure.
Yeah. So just real quick, just got back from Youth Nationals recently. I was there at the end of July, and boy, that's always a blast.
Medina, Ohio.
Medina, Ohio. First time it's been there since 2005. It was there in 04 and 05. First time it's been back. And that club did an awesome job. Larry Hawk in the Medina Club. Rudy Reinhold in the Nova Club. They did a good job of getting the kids in the woods. And it's just beautiful setting of the clubhouse there. Yeah. Beautiful pond and an old building. Said they bought that piece of property. It's 52 acres. They bought it back in the late 40s for $2,000.
Really?
Yeah. Can't imagine what that would go for now, but I'd say they could get their return on investment pretty good.
It's always cool to hear the stories of some of those old clubs like that.
Yeah. Especially those that have land and have really gathered assets and put themselves in a good position. Just real quick about Youth Nationals, while we were there, had a couple instances where the podcast came up, and it was kind of funny. On Saturday night, I just got done interviewing our senior division hunt national champion, Joel Beachy, and Joe Yoder is the owner of the dog. I come in and we're kind of discussing how we're going to put out this interview with Joel, and he tells me that he had first listened to or heard about Youth Nationals on this very podcast. So that was pretty neat. Joel didn't mention it in our interview, but I thought that was pretty neat. It makes it kind of worthwhile that we're doing it.
Yeah, heck yeah.
And then just a couple days ago, fielded a call from Leslie Brooks over in Virginia, yeah. And her daughter, Jordan, they had me on speakerphone in the car because they were having a little bit of a debate on how the Spotlight Series points worked. And Jordan must be a loyal listener because we talk about her pretty often, her and her brother Jacob. But sounds like she won the debate once I cleared up some of the Spotlight Series particulars. So I thought that was pretty fun.
And she got her information from here.
Straight from the podcast.
Cool.
Yep.
That is awesome. Speaking of that, I did a Master Hounds for a club here locally. It was RQE here several weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they were talking about, one guy that was there was talking about they had a youth hunt or a YEP event. And for part of the class, they actually played one of our podcasts. We were talking about a couple different rules. So that's cool. So Hey, we got to make sure.
No
Trevor,
pressure.
Yeah, no pressure, Trevor. You got to make sure you get it right.
Yeah.
No, but that's all good stuff.
It is. Yeah. And it kind of makes it worthwhile to hear people listening and especially the younger folks, give them something to listen to and maybe learn something.
For sure. absolutely.
Yeah. So we're getting here into the middle to later parts of summer with the fall schedule creeping up on us. Been doing any hunting lately?
Not really. I hate to say it, but I haven't. Here a while back we talked about, I wanted the running season open up here in Michigan. I wanted to get up north and do a little hare hunting, get the dogs going, started again, and I still haven't. Here at the time of this recording, it's almost a month later now, and I still haven't made it up there. But
I know you've been staying busy with obviously traveling for events and doing some auctioneering stuff on the side. So you have a lot on your plate, I know.
Yeah.
We've been getting the coon dogs out pretty regularly. We've been hunting at least 3 or 4 nights a week so far. We've had really good weather here this summer, or in this later part of the summer, but we need some rain bad.
Yeah.
It's dry.
Yeah, it is. But I see you've been hunting a little bit.
We've been doing pretty good.
Taking Brindley out, and your wife's been hunting with you a little bit.
I was going to say, I used to, this time of year was always the fine tuning part of the year, right? You're getting ready for Autumn Oaks and the World Championship and trying to get your dogs ready for those events. But now whenever I'm out there hunting alone, I'm trying to get it ready for Brindley so I don't get critiqued so bad if the dogs don't look very good.
Brindley is your daughter. How old is she now?
She just turned 4 in January.
So she can probably get around the woods pretty good.
She can do pretty good. Yeah, she's a little lazier this time of year when it's a little warmer.
Yeah.
But she's still got short legs. I'll give her a break. But, it kind of took out the pup the other night when she came with me. I probably should have brought the more seasoned dog, but he got stuck over. Cut him loose in a big hardwood creek bottom. Always tree a lot of coons there. And, of course, he goes left-handed from there and gets over into kind of a cut-over briar thicket kind of spot. And he kind of gets wound down in there, and he's stuck in there for, 20 minutes. And I'm a little frustrated at the tailgate. Like, I wish he would get out of there. And she said, Dad, you may have should have brought Hank on this one. He wouldn't annoy you so bad.
Hey, kids are usually pretty honest.
Pretty honest. Yeah.
That's how my little nephews used to be, Paul's boys. They used to go hunting with us when they were, 5 and 6 years old. And I can tell you, they knew which ones were the good dogs and which ones they didn't. If they had their choice, they knew which ones to pick.
That's right. Yeah. Well, today's episode, like we talked about, we're going to be talking about rules quite a bit. We've talked a lot about programs. We've talked a lot about specific dogs in the past few Coonhound episodes we did. So we're going to get back to rules. We got a lot of rules to go through, in the course of this podcast. So I think it's good to start cutting off some of the meat here on the bone and get into some important rules that we get talked about a lot in our sport. And the first one's going to be one that I actually got an email from back after some of our first podcasts from a guy in Illinois that I know talking about. He would like to hear us talk about the scratch for fighting rule and the ins and outs of that. So that's going to be the first rule that we cover today. So getting it started off here, I'm just going to read the rules straight from the rule book. This is Rule 6B under the scratched column. Dogs will be scratched for fighting or attempting to fight when off leash during the hunt, including any timeout periods. When the aggressive dog is known, scratch the aggressor only. If not known, scratch dogs involved. Withdrawing to avoid dog being reported for fighting is not permitted. So this rule is, it's got a couple key parts to it, and I think we're going to break it down here kind of part by part and get to the nitty-gritty of it. But first, just the first thing that stands out, fighting or attempting to fight. Obviously, fighting is pretty self-explanatory. Everybody knows if a dog's in a fight, you know what's happening there. But attempting to fight is something that we define in our rule book towards the end in Rule 16, where it tells the definitions. And attempting to fight requires 2 things: showing aggressive behavior and interfering with another dog. Do you want to go into that a little bit? Yeah,
that's the one that I think that gets the most questions, that we get the most questions on, what that is exactly. And probably the one that is, hey, let's just dig into what it is. Like you said, we're talking about attempting to fight, where a dog can be scratched for that. This is something less than fighting, but attempting to fight. So the dog must show 2 different things, or meet 2 criteria. Number 1, it must show aggressive behavior. Aggressive behavior can come in various different ways. It can be growling at another dog. It can be
face barking, or kind of blowing at a dog, as people would say.
Exactly. All hackled up maybe and just standing there growling or whatever. So that's one thing, showing some form of aggression. Number 2, it must also be interfering with another dog because of its aggressive behavior that it's showing. So that part of it is, honestly, because of that, there may be some dogs that won't be it won't interfere with, whereas this dog might be doing the same form of aggression to a different dog that might react differently.
Sure.
So it really has a bearing on how that dog reacts to this aggressive behavior. So that's what you need to look at.
Yeah. Yep. And it's important for everybody to know that it has to meet both of those criteria.
Yeah. So what are some examples of that maybe as far as interfering with another dog? I think it's important. Do you have some examples that we can give, or I can come up with a couple? One might be where a dog is, a dog sits back off the tree a little bit, because of this dog maybe is a little bit aggressive or what have you. So let's use that example. Let's say this dog on the tree that is the one we're concerned about, let's call him dog A, turns around and maybe kind of face barks at dog B who's over here, or maybe beside him on the tree. Let's just do, that way. Face barks at this dog and growls at him a little bit, okay? Dog B doesn't bother him a lick, just keeps on tree and doesn't bother him a lick, okay? That is not interfering with dog B. Right. He might be face barking a little bit, or might even be growling a little bit at him, but it's dog B is not bothered by it.
Right. It's not interfering with his ability to compete in the cast and tree in this case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but let's say he comes. Let's change it slightly. Make it say it's dog C, where dog A comes around and goes after dog C. Maybe growls at him or face barks at him, goes after him. And boom, there goes dog C off the tree. That would be considered his interfering with dog C.
That dog no longer has the ability to compete the way he reacted.
Although he might not have actually physically grabbed the dog, he's showing aggression, through his face barking or growling at him, and he's ran him off the tree.
Yep.
That is attempting to fight.
Yep.
So it really depends on how that second dog reacts to it, I guess, sometimes. But defining fighting to begin with is, that's one thing. Really fighting. And if you need to be reasonable about it, use common sense, and I think, it's a serious offense. And it's also a serious deal to be scratched for fighting, so you want to make sure you make the right call. And I think, and not just every little off bark you hear. Oh, the dogs are fighting. We need to be more reasonable than that.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of the next sentence there: when off leash during the hunt. The addition of off leash in this rule came in the 2020 rule change year. Were you had those rule proposals sent in? Do you remember anything about the intent of that rule at all?
Yeah, it was basically the old rule used to say that dogs could be scratched for fighting under the authority of the judge. So what is under the authority of the judge, or when is that? Rule book tells us that the judge, when he receives a scorecard at the club, that's when his authority starts. And it ceases when he turns a scorecard in to the club. So that technically meant, under the authority of the judge, meant that dogs could get scratched for fighting in a dog box and things like that on the way to the woods or between drops and things like that. So this off-leash proposal, that is now a rule that was added in 2020, dogs can only be scratched now during the hunt and while they are off leash.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Yep.
Not in a dog box somewhere on the way to the woods or between drops and things of that nature.
Right. With it and the wording of the rule kind of comes some, I think, some misconceptions about it. This is a rule that's on our Master of Hounds tests, and we've both graded quite a few of them. It's one that gets missed quite a bit, and I'll just tell you the scenario right now, and we'll kind of go over the ins and outs of it. So basically, the scenario is basically boiled down to this. Dog A's treed. The cast is at the tree. Dog A's handled on his leash. He's tied back on the tree. While the cast is shining the tree, dog B comes by the cast, comes into dog A, where dog A grabs a hold of dog B. He's obviously the aggressor. What do you do with dog A in that scenario? And it's one that gets missed probably more than half the time if you were to look at the test. But in that case, dog A is protected because of the wording in this rule, and he is on the leash, so he's not held liable for his actions in fighting with dog B in that case.
That's right. He's on leash, even though he's in a scoring situation where he's tied back, to score a tree. He's still protected by that because he is on leash. Whether he's tied up or has got the leash on him, he's handled So he's considered to be on leash and cannot be scratched for fighting during that time. Sometimes it happens when guys, you always have to tie dogs back at the tree when you're scoring a tree. And good handlers or the more experienced handlers will pretty quickly learn to always keep your dog away from other dogs, that they can't reach other dogs, as you never know. It's strange dogs together when they're maybe normally don't have any temperament issues. Little scuffles can break out, and just to keep them away. And that would happen sometimes, and then next thing you have an issue on your hand. But now that you can't scratch them. If they're on the lead strap, cannot scratch them.
And this is probably a good place to say, we don't all have to agree with the rules in the rule book. There'll be a lot of people out here that don't agree with this rule. Mm-hmm. Maybe we don't like this particular part of the rule, but it's UKC's job, it's the event official job, it's the judge's job to apply the rules that are in the rule book the way they are, and to get the calls right in the woods.
That's right. And I like this new edition really because it's, sometimes and the reason, the intent of the whole reason is obviously we temperament issues are. Most people believe them to be genetic, and that's kind of a genetic fault or what have you. And it's not something you want to pass on, it's a temperament issue or what have you. And that's why we have this rule in place here. But so for other situations like just for instance, something as simple as dogs fighting in a dog box, and that does happen sometimes, but that can happen even with a dog that isn't temperamental.
Right.
Keep in mind, oftentimes I'm sure you do the same thing, when you're hunting one dog a lot, especially if you're getting ready for the night hunts and things like that. They're used to having their own hole in the box in the back and this and that. And oftentimes you're hunting them by themselves or maybe with other dogs they're familiar with. Go to a night hunt and bring in a strange dog, put him in with this dog. Guess what? It's things happen sometimes, doesn't? Yeah. So I think this is a great rule.
And I agree. I think that this rule implementation does more than the fluky instances where it doesn't do good.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. The next point to point out is a lot of misconception we get in calls in is that you don't have to see a dog fight to make the call on to scratch dogs. That was a proposal before, but it never passed. And right now, the way it is, you don't have to see a dog fight in order to scratch the dogs involved. It's a call that's made by the judge. Obviously, most people that hunt at all are going to know when a dog fight's happening. It's a judgment call.
Yeah, and it is. And I think, again, you use common sense and experience, I think, and you lean on your experience. And I think, I just feel like when we make those calls, we need to be considerate of that, not just because you have a little off bark or a couple off barks or whatever. I think there's a big difference between that and an actual dog fight, And there again, and it's those are judgment calls, but I think, like I said, mentioned, the scratch or dogs fighting is a serious offense. Scratching dogs for fighting is also a serious offense. And it's not something we should just take lightly. Before, if I'm judging the cast, I need to make sure that I have an actual dog fight for sure before I go scratching dogs for fighting. It should go well beyond just another avenue to eliminate competition. Should never, ever be that. If you're making those calls, wow, no, should not be doing that. That's nothing to consider there.
Yeah, like you said, it has serious implications more so than just this cast when you're talking about a dog possibly getting barred for an amount of time for fights, and especially if you don't see it happening, if you're a ways off, err on the side of caution.
100%.
When making those calls.
I would always agree with that.
It's not uncommon for dogs to be blowing or something if they're, it's not a great thing, but it's not uncommon, and you need to err on the side of caution, get in there and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that.
And also kind of going hand in hand with that is if the aggressor is known, then you're going to scratch the aggressor. If you don't know the aggressor, unfortunately, you got a dog fight, you're going to have to scratch all dogs involved in that fight.
Yeah, and oftentimes you'll have situations, if you have an obvious dog fight, before you get to the tree, don't see it, you got to make the call, if you have an obvious fight. But in that case, if you don't see it, it's going to be hard for you to determine who the aggressor was.
That's right.
You can't just go by because the dog growled a little bit when it came out of the dog box or whatever. All that means is the dog growled a little bit when you brought him out of the dog box.
Yeah.
you don't know how the other one reacted to that, or you really don't know, but so without seeing it, it's going to be, we would always caution that you determine an aggressor without seeing who the aggressor actually was.
Is it ever an option to just go ahead and break the two dogs up and throw them back on the tree and figure out who the aggressive one is?
Hey, I'm glad you bring that up, because that does come up, and I've actually seen it happen on a night hunt where the judge didn't know, and it's like, okay, we've got these two dogs are fighting on to figure out who the aggressor was.
Yeah.
And that is no good.
Right.
All you're doing is finding out who is now going to get who's going to go after the next or the other one first.
Yep.
You got to deal with what you had, not what you're about to make happen here.
Yeah. You actually told me about that before we started recording. That's why I brought that up. I'd never heard of that before, but interesting way to try to figure it out. I guess.
I've actually seen it, and I thought, wow. We had another dog fight. I remember that one that you're talking that I was referring to.
Yeah.
We had ended up with another dog fight, but it's like, okay, doesn't mean anything. These dogs were,
they're already amped up at that time.
Right.
So, and kind of the last part of the rule there, the last sentence, under no circumstances can a dog be withdrawn to avoid being scratched for fighting. Obviously, we talked about it a little bit. It's being scratched for fighting is a big time deal, and you're not going to be able to get out of it just by being withdrawn. You're going to have to take your scratching and as it comes. And I just tell you a little bit about our scratch for fighting rules. A dog is allowed to be scratched for fighting 2 times in a 2-year period. Once it has that 3rd time in a 2-year period, that's whenever that dog is going to be barred from participating in UKC events for 2 years from the date of the 3rd scratching offense.
Yeah, that's right. And if we can back up just a little bit as far as, you can't withdraw to avoid being scratched for fighting.
Yep.
And I know that happens sometimes. Judges should not allow that to happen. If they are, they're violating the rule. And that's just a matter of, let's say you have a dog fight, an obvious dog fight, and I say, hey, judge, let me just withdraw my dog, and we'll leave it at that. No, that is not an option. Now, if you might have had a little scuffle or somebody mentions it or whatever, that's a little different than, if there's a call to be made here, then you can't. That's not an option.
Yeah.
And I've seen it already where guys have withdrawn dogs because of what was going on, where a call was not made. But did withdraw, just don't want any issues to happen. That's not the same what we're talking about here. But you cannot withdraw is not an option or an alternative to being rode up.
Yeah. And it's probably a good time to mention to any judges out there that if you were to scratch a dog, especially for fighting, be sure to indicate it on the card. And if you're an event official, make sure if there's a scratch on there and you don't know what the scratch is for, talk with the judges and the members of the cast and figure out what the scratch is for. That way that the dogs get the penalties that they have earned.
Exactly. It kind of goes with, always try to encourage guys, when a dog is scratched, write down what for.
Yeah.
Is it scratch for fighting? Is it scratch for something else? And the officials need to know what the dog was scratched for.
Yeah. And especially in an event like, let's say, Tournament of Champions, for instance, where a dog's scratched for, tree and off game or minus an out on Friday night, or still eligible to hunt on Saturday night. But if they get scratched for fighting on Friday night, they're done for the weekend. Yeah. So it's important to indicate that on the scorecard. So these scratches that you accrue over the dog's lifetime, they can happen in night hunt, field trial, water race, bench show, any UKC licensed coonhound event. And we get a lot of calls asking about when scratching offenses come off of a dog's record. Obviously, the record, the scratching offense will remain on the dog's record, but after that 2-year period, it's going to fall off the dog's record. It won't be considered anymore as far as barring the dog goes.
Yeah, it doesn't technically fall off the record. It stays on there, remains on the dog's record forever. It's just, after 2 years, if you don't have 3 within the 2 years, then it just doesn't count against the dog anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually come off the dog's record.
And one thing to kind of tie up the end of this here is we had a pretty good question a couple months back that I actually had to talk to you about a little bit, and we ended up running it in the advisor column, and I kind of went back for reference on it to write this article about a dog that had been withdrawn from the hunt in the middle of the hunt still. And there's a dog in their tree. They're heading to the tree, and this guy's still trying to round up his withdrawn dog. He feels like he's out of it, but his withdrawn dog gets in there with the dog that's treating at the time, and a dog fight happens. And he was kind of wondering, what should happen to the withdrawn dog? He's withdrawn, or should he get a strike record on there? And during the hunt, before that dog's handled or on leash, that dog's still liable for scratching.
That's exactly right. If it's still during hunt time, and that's different, than versus after the hunt time has expired. Yep. Totally different. During hunt time, if they're off leash, they're still subjected to this fighting rule.
Even during timeout periods during the hunt too is important.
Exactly. So exactly.
Until the hunt time runs out, your dog's liable to be scratched until you get it on the leash. So be sure to get it handled.
Yeah. But then when hunt time has expired, at that point, can't scratch a dog for fighting anymore.
Yeah, so we've kind of covered scratched for fighting in depth there. You got any good stories?
Well, you know what? It is we talk about it. It is a serious offense, and it is. But I do have a little kind of a funny little story. So there was a young dog I was hunting years ago. He was only like 10 months old, and it was at an RQE out of our club. And I had to guide, so I hunted this pup for a friend of mine, and he was a nice little dog. I thought he probably wasn't quite ready for an RQE yet. But little Earl, and he was a nice little dog. But I drew a 3-dog cast, and we made a tree. I want to say at least 2 of this pup and another dog, maybe all 3 of them treed together on the first one. This was years ago. I say years ago, 20 years ago. But the second, we recut again, and he kind of got in a swampy area off to his right. He struck over there, and he trees. I got the first tree. The other dogs are kind of out. Beaten on a bad track elsewhere. Yeah. And he trees over there, and these other 2 dogs go to him. And he was kind of on some little pad stuff, kind of a swampy area. There was water around there, and he kind of had to jump from pad to pad, to get to him. And long story short, before we get there, now all 3 dogs are there with him, the 2 older dogs, and they break out in a fight. And I know it's the 2 older dogs, so I can still hear my pup treeing every now and then, but he's shutting up. We get there, and I'm from him to, or from you to me, from him, and he's stopped, and he's looking down in the water. These 2 dogs are going at it in the water,
just splashing
around in there, and they're pretty much kind of underwater and this and that, splashing around. He's looking at him. Before I can get my hands on him, this little sucker dives right in on top of those 2 dogs. I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And I really thought he probably thought they were fighting a coon down there.
Yeah.
Because he was not a temperamental dog at all, but it was
just a youngster.
But it was funny to see. He kind of had to be there to watch him. But he's just looking at him until we get up there, and he just dives right down there on top of him in the middle of these 2 grown dogs. Jumps right in there, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
Didn't want to miss out on the fun, did he?
So there's a time when I was judging the cast, and I thought, okay, well, I guess we were all scratched for fighting. All 3 of them.
Short night for it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good
I'll
stuff.
never forget that. That was a little Earl, man. Poor little guy. As far as I know, I'll have to look, but I'd say that's probably the only scratch on his record, but that was the night.
Speaking of deep dive, I guess our next, it's a good segue into our next segment. We're going to be talking about Rule 11, deep diving into this rule. And we've kind of foreshadowed Rule 11 a little bit because it's kind of one that gets overlooked. It's tucked towards the back of the rules, but man, there's a lot there to unpack. And we're going to go through them one by one, and we're going to talk about each one a little bit. Maybe not in as much depth as we may in a later episode, but a good overview here, I think. So the first one, Rule 11A, pertains to prior to arriving at tree. And so we're just going to kind of go through them sentence by sentence here, and we'll talk about each one a little bit and learn some stuff.
Yeah, there's this Rule 11 has 4 different sections. It has 11A. Talks about prior to arriving at the tree. 11B is after arriving at tree. 11C talks about split trees. And then the newer one that we added this last time around for 2020 was we added Section D, 11D, and that's all about recasting. So it's before, after you get to the tree, it talks about split trees, and then what you do after scoring.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack here. So I think people are really going to learn some stuff, and if nothing else, whenever you're judging a cast, you'll kind of know where to refer to, or if you're competing in a cast, where to refer to if you need to find a certain rule.
Yeah.
So just getting right to it, A, prior to arriving at tree, first sentence, scorecards to be carried by judge or a non-hunting scorekeeper if all cast members agree, and must be scored in plain view of all.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward, and that must be scored in plain view of all. Should never be any secrets who got what, and if you have any questions about it, I should be able to see the card at any time.
Yep.
Yep.
B, dogs must hold the tree for 3 minutes unless all dogs in cast are declared treed, on leash, or hunting time has expired. If one dog in cast or one dog remaining in cast, dog must hold tree for 3 minutes.
Yeah, again, I think that's pretty straightforward. If you have if all dogs tree together and they all do it in the first 20 seconds, guess what? The tree's closed at that point.
Yep.
Otherwise the dog must hold tree for 3 minutes. Until they're all declared treed, and they could be on split trees. You could have a dog A called treed, and then just boom, 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 the rest of them tree somewhere else. If the 3 minutes isn't up, if all dogs in your cast, whether that's 2, 3, or 4 dogs, as soon as they're all declared treed, you no longer have to wait out the 3 minutes.
That's right.
Tree is closed. All the trees would be closed.
Yeah. And there could probably be some tricky situations, I guess, when you come up to it. Like maybe, let's say, 2-dog cast, A and B are split treed, or so let's just say A's treed. You get in there, score A, you got him on the leash. He declared dog B treed. Tree's closed.
Tree's closed. Yep.
Before you cut A loose, even.
Yep.
So then, some different technicalities like that. But I think if you really read the rule, it's pretty straightforward in explaining that.
Hey, one other scenario here that let's throw in here. Let's say we have 2 dogs, dogs A and B. Dog A trees. Start the 3 minutes on dog A. Dog B trees and is obviously split. Let's say just over here off to the side. We're close. We're off to the side. Obviously it's split. You start a second 3-minute clock on this dog. Let's say those are the only 2 dogs in the cast, just to make it simple here. And we barely, let's say 30 seconds later into the 3 minutes here, we've got all dogs declared treed. But let's say dog B leaves its tree and comes over to dog A. Yeah. Just because the 3 wasn't up, trees were still closed. Yeah. As soon as
the second that dog was declared treed.
Exactly.
They're closed.
Even if the 3 minutes hadn't went by, and there's no room for dog B on A's tree in terms of getting in on the 3-minute rule anyways. So tree's closed.
There's some technique. There's some situations which we may get to in later episodes when we go more in depth, but I think any situation you have in the woods, if you refer to this rule, read the sentences clearly, you're going to get your answer.
Yeah, but then at the last sentence, and if there's only one dog in the cast remaining, that dog must always hold the tree for 3 minutes, even though all dogs technically are considered treed. Right. That's not the must hold it if it's the only dog in the cast.
Yeah. Here, the next sentence here is one that we get a lot of questions on, and I think is probably misapplied quite often. And it says dogs declared treed within hunting time are eligible for scoring.
Yeah. And I like that rule. That's a good one. So if you have to call timeout for any reason, or just before hunt time breaks out, any dog that was declared treed you got to score them.
That's right.
They're eligible for scoring, and you got to score them.
Yeah. And I think most people do it right at the end of the hunt, and for people treating their dog before the hunt's over. But I think it's during timeouts where they get caught up on deleting their tree points. That's incorrect. If the dog is treed before the timeout's called, that dog's still accredited for his tree. You got to go get it scored.
Yep. If you and Todd and I are hunting in the same cast, you've got old Hank treed in there, and Todd and I decide, hey, we need to call timeout just because we have a majority here to call timeout for whatever reason. We can't take anything away from it. We still got to score your dog.
Moving on to
and then, hey, one more thing with that comes. So we've called timeout here, let's say, and we go into your dog. Hunt time comes back in when we start shine time.
That's correct.
When we're scoring that dog.
That is absolutely correct, and I believe that we're probably going to see that after arriving at tree here in a minute. But you're spot on with that. And then we're going to finish out this A section here with the last couple sentences. If at all possible, be at the tree within 3 minutes. If handlers are so far from tree that it will take more than 3 minutes to get to tree, they are to start walking toward tree, but stopping periodically to let other handlers see if their dog is treeing. Judge is not to let any handler keep holding them away from tree just to let dog get to tree after 3 minutes are up.
Yeah, so 2 different things that covers there in D right there. One of them is, the first one is, you should try to be at the tree within 3 minutes if you can, if you're that far away. And I've seen it. I've had it happen before, and it gets a little frustrating when you have your judges saying, no, we're staying right here until the 3 is up. That is not what the rule says. The rule says to try to be there, and they should stop along the way to let somebody else listen for their dog if they need to. The last part is that the judge is not to let any handler keep holding them away from the tree just to let dog get to the tree after 3 minutes are up. Once the 3's up, we should be going to him, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and this is another one that could be a little regional. Up here, northern Indiana, northern Ohio, probably trees are going to be closer together. You have a chance to be there in 3 minutes. West Virginia, you're probably not going to make it to any tree in 3 minutes. If a person declares their dog treed, what this rule is saying is to start heading towards the tree. Cut the distance. Stop periodically if other people want to listen for their dogs, but start putting a dent in it. Don't stand in one spot and wait for those 3 minutes and then start going.
Again, everybody should be reasonable. Judge should be reasonable about it, and so should the handlers asking to stop.
Yep. Yeah, moving on to the next section. After arriving at tree. These are for instances that occur after arriving at the tree. First thing, real simple. After 3 minutes, first dog's tree may be scored. Got to wait for the tree time to be over.
Yep.
Score the tree. B.
So in other words, if you have a dog split, let's say you have A, B, and C here, if dog A trees first or whatever, that's the first one you're going to score. Just because B's tree is also closed and you get to B's tree first or you walk by it, doesn't mean you score B first. You got to first dog's tree's got to be scored first.
That's important. Got to do them in order by when they tree, right?
And the reason, obviously, for that is to be fair, because that dog treed first. It also is going to have the option to be cut loose or recast first again.
This next one here is one that if you go to a lot of events, you'll hear all kinds of different scenarios pop up about this one. And I'm glad that we're able to kind of squash some of the misconceptions out there and give our official interpretation. But it says here, dog should not be minus tree points if he comes back a short distance to meet handler if dog goes back in and trees satisfactorily.
Yeah, and that is a good one for us to spend a little bit of time with here. And we hear all kinds of things. We've heard of, well, so long as the dog is under the umbrella of the tree. Or, the dog can't, that's fine if the dog comes back so long as heaven forbid, he puts his nose on the ground, just even for a little bit.
Yep.
So let's stop with that right there for a second. The rule says nothing about the dog putting his nose on the ground, or it says nothing about under the umbrella of the tree. Obviously, the dog must be showing tree to the satisfaction of the judge. But the rules do allow for the dog to come back and meet his handler so long as it goes back in and trees satisfactorily.
Yep.
So if a dog comes back out, if I'm judging, I should not allow that dog to be handled that when he's coming back to you. I just need to watch that dog, make sure the handler doesn't handle him. And if the handler does, that probably means I'm not doing my job either to stop it before he does. All I need to see is just make sure he goes back and trees satisfactorily. If he doesn't, then I'm going to minus the dog for not doing that. But until he does that, the next is, putting his nose on the ground. Okay. I think, dogs traveling from point A to point B, they're scent hounds. What dog doesn't?
Natural instinct.
Natural instinct sometimes. Now there's a big difference between that. And here again is just common sense and using a sound judgment. What is the dog doing if he puts his head down? Is he really milling around or trying to find a track, or is he just got his nose down on the way back to the tree? And if the dog can't tell you which one of those he's doing, then a little more experience is probably needed. But I don't think that's that difficult. Yeah.
Kind of one that you hear at any hunt you go to in a judges meeting before the cast starts, even World Championships, Autumn Oak Final Fours, TOC Final Fours, you'll hear them say to the judge, and my dog may meet me off the tree a little bit. I think they're protecting themselves. They've probably been bit by this rule before, but I think, like you said, common sense goes a long way right here.
It does two things, and I think we need to be miserable or reasonable about it. And the other thing is, again, don't use it for a way to get a dog minus or out of the cast or issuing them minus points too quickly. Hey, if the dog is milling around or is in fact looking for a track instead of basically showing treed, then the rule is there. The dog should in fact be minused, absolutely. But just because the dog puts his head down doesn't necessarily constitute an automatic minus at all. And I think, again, just a good common sense.
Yep. Next one's really straightforward, but it's in the rule book. Dogs at tree must be leashed.
Mm-hmm. Easy.
Next sentence says 8 minutes of hunting time may be used to shine trees. Another easy one that we know that's our shine time. It is important to note, like you said earlier, even during situations where you're scoring a dog during a timeout period, you still got to run the 8 minutes of or you got to run shine time. Still got to take it off the hunt time. And the last sentence of that part says individual holding first tree shall be granted first 2 minutes to shine alone if requested.
Yeah, and the judge should always make sure that happens, that whoever had the handler whose dog had the first tree, that he gets granted that opportunity. That should be clear before you go in. And part of the reason is hey, those that have hunted for a while, and especially in the summertime when there's a lot of leaves on, they want to shine the tree with a light, and give that guy the courtesy to do so for the first 2 minutes, and not have everybody lighting up the trees and things like that. So yeah, they should be granted that first 2 minutes, and the judge should allow that to happen if that's what they want.
Yeah, a good thing about the squall, with the squall rule kind of being out as soon as shine time starts, that guy has that first 2 minutes, he can maneuver around with his low light, use his squaller, and you kind of use his technique to look around before everybody else gets involved.
Exactly right, and he may not want to squall.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Going on to section C, split trees. A, where dogs split up, judge will go with handler to the dog that trees first.
Yep. So we're talking about split trees here, and what we talked about a minute ago, but we're going to go to that first dog first. That's where the judge needs to go.
Yep. If a split tree is obvious, which is the judge's decision, split tree will be assigned.
Yeah, I like that one because it says in parentheses is where it says judge's decision. And what that's referring to is who it needs to be obvious to. It needs to be obvious. If it's obvious to the judge, if I'm judging, if it's obvious to me that a dog is split, then I'll put him on the scorecard as split. It doesn't matter what you think. Yeah. If you think it's obvious, or if the next Todd Kellum thinks it's obvious, or it doesn't matter. It's what I think, whether it's obvious or not. And then the other thing, I think it's a good rule for me as the judge, because there are situations where I'm thinking they could easily, it sounds like they're split. They're in there a little ways, and it sounds to me like they're split, but maybe they're not. Sounds like they might be, but the word used here for me is obvious. Yeah. That kind of makes it easy for me. If it's not obvious, then I'm not going to put them down as split until it becomes obvious. Yeah. And that may not be until I get a lot closer. Yep. Or maybe even till I walk in and see, oh, we got one here and we've got one over here.
I agree. Totally.
I think that makes it easy. So.
Yep. Let's see. Separate time must be kept on each tree unless all dogs are declared treed. We talked about that one a little bit earlier.
We did. We covered it. Yep.
Next sentence says, judge shall give handler permission to handle dog on split tree unless cast is in process of shining tree. Kind of a two-part thing here to discuss, I think, because this is this is one that you hear a lot about. I think the easy one is giving a handler permission unless you're shining a tree. As long as shine time's not in, a judge may give the handler the option to go handle a tree or handle their dog on the tree. But if shine time's in, got to wait till shine time's out.
Got to wait. Let's make sure we cover that one, because don't get caught with somebody trying to use that rule on you. If you're here shining a tree and my dog gets treed right over here, or let's say, my dog gets treed right over here 20 yards away or 10 yards away, and I can just easily walk over there and handle my dog. Rules do not allow you to do that, and don't let somebody kind of let the judge, or the judge shouldn't allow somebody to kind of let him walk into it and then somebody raise their hands and hey, he's scratched, rule violation.
That's right.
So be, if that question comes into the master hounds and it doesn't matter why, who, what, when, or why, if somebody handled a dog on a split tree while the cast was in process of shining a tree, his hands are bound by the same rule.
That's the rule.
Nothing else matters. So it doesn't matter how close the dog is. All that doesn't matter.
That's right.
But but the next part is we'll get into
the second part of this sentence that's kind of pertinent and discussed a lot, I think, is sending handlers to handle their dog. Forget about shine time. Sending handlers to handle their dog on split trees.
Yeah,
obviously it's permissible. The judge gives an option, but I have a note here: be reasonable. Mm-hmm. And I think we both agree on that. If your dog's a mile through the country and you obviously you got to go handle your dog, come all the way back to score this next tree, you're eating up 45 minutes, an hour of this cast. You're ruining the cast there. You're not being reasonable.
Yeah, I think the other thing is worthy to note here that we need to think about. Most of these rules, and this is one, were written decades ago.
Right.
And when we're talking decades ago, dogs didn't split up. They treed together. So this actually hasn't changed, to kind of maybe fit some of the dogs that we're hunting today, where we do have more splits than we did back in the day, But so if you have a dog that's, a mile away, no way. That'd be unreasonable for me to allow you to go handle your dog that is a mile away, because the thing is, the intent of it, we need you back here to score this first tree with us.
That's exactly right.
So somewhere in between there, that's where you should, the judge should kind of make the decision whether or not he should allow somebody to go handle a dog on a split tree. And handlers should be aware of that and note that.
It's a two-way street.
It is.
Both sides have to be reasonable and use common sense as usual. And if you look at the next sentence there, after the split dog is handled, handler shall return to cast.
There you go.
That's if you're walking 2 miles in an hour cast, you ruined the cast there. And to finish this one off is, let's see, if all dogs are declared treed and handled and cast needs to move to new location after scoring all trees, trees may be scored in most convenient order. Otherwise, trees must be scored in the order dogs were declared treed. Refer to Rule 7E and 11D if applicable.
Yep. And then as 7E says, after scoring dog or dogs on a tree and all remaining dogs are either on leash or declared treed, and cast decides to move to a new location after all trees are scored, timeout may be called walking to remaining trees with scored dogs on leash. Hunt time shall be back in during shining time of each tree, obviously. And then the last sentence states, if dog leaves tree, time shall be called back in and dogs on leash recast again.
Yeah. So when we're talking about this, when this is talking about scoring dogs in the most convenient order, it sounds great. We got dog A here. He treed first. He's right here. Dog B trees 800 yards to the country, and then dog C trees here 20 yards from us. You want to score that dog and keep the dog on a leash, but you're wasting valuable time for dog B that treed before dog C did. You need to get in there and get him scored, so he has the option to cut loose if he wants to. Mm-hmm. If you don't do that correctly, you can get in a bind in a quick, fast, and in a hurry. So the only way that you're going to be able to score them in the most convenient order in this case is to get all the dogs in the cast handled that are declared treed or on the leash, and then you can score the dogs in the most convenient order. And
that's why you can then also call timeout when you're moving from tree to tree, because not to take away from the dogs that treed first, that now don't have the opportunity to be recast first again.
Yep, that's correct. And we'll get into a little bit of the very last section here, which you mentioned is newer to the rule book, and that's the recasting section. Mm-hmm. We're going to start out with the first sentence there. After being scored, dogs shall not be released until another dog struck in on track or on tree opens. Yep. If no other dog is declared struck, scoring dog may be released immediately after scoring the tree.
Yep, and I think that's pretty straightforward. What that means, after you come out of a scoring dog or a scoring situation, let's say we have dog A that we just scored its tree by itself. The other threes are still out on track, running somewhere. Dog A, I cannot release that dog until another dog that is struck in opens up. I can take him away from the tree, walk away, and I have to stand there and wait until that dog opens up before I can recast dog A again. And another one you may have, if there's a dog on tree, obviously or a dog treeing, that probably is not going to take very long, but you must first wait to open that dog before another dog actually barks.
Yep, that's right. Got to break the 8 or the 2, whether the dog's on track or tree in that scenario, to be able to release this dog that you just scored.
The last part of it is very simple. If no other dogs are declared struck, you can just go flip them loose whenever you want to right away.
That's right. Next sentence kind of ties into it. However, if another dog in cast is declared treed, the handler has the option to recast or keep scored dog on leash. Handlers opting to keep dog on leash may not recast dog until next opportunity arises, and it defines the next opportunity arising as next tree is scored or a dog that's declared treed leaves his tree.
Yeah, that's the what we call the option to recast rule. So if we have dog A again, I'll call it my dog, and let's say your dog B, is also declared treed somewhere. As soon as we score my dog, I have the option either to recast it or I can hang on to it. Yep. That's my option.
If there's another dog declared treed is the important thing to mention.
Exactly. And if there's no dog declared treed, I don't have that option. I have to turn loose. Yeah. It's only if another dog is declared treed when I'm ready to turn loose. Then that's when my option is available to me.
Yeah. I actually fielded a call here it was just 2 or 3 days ago, actually this week, about a guy who was on a cast where This guy took a two coon lead. There's 40 minutes left in the cast. No dogs were treated in when he pulls his dog off the tree, and he says he's using our new option for leash lock to keep his dog on the leash for the remainder of the hunt. So for 40 minutes, this guy led his dog around, and I told him he may have been taking advantage of some people who didn't know the rules particularly well in that instance. But you only have an option to keep your dog on the leash if another dog is declared treed.
That's right.
You got to hold people accountable to this. Don't let them flip flop the verbiage of the rules and all that sort of stuff. Be sure you're well read on it and keep them in line on that, because people are going to try to get away with what they can get away with.
You know, there's another thing that comes to mind here. Let's change the scenario slightly. Let's make dogs A and B, both you and I, our dogs, both on the same tree. We score both of them. And let's say we have dog C is also declared treed. Now you and I both have the option. I may opt to hang on to my dog, walk the dog to dog C to score it, but you may want to turn yours loose, and that's perfectly fine. We don't both have to do the same thing.
That's exactly right. Moving on to the next sentences, which we've kind of hashed a little bit in the prior section, it says if all remaining dogs in cast are declared treed and cast decides they need to move to a new location after all dogs are scored, all scored dogs shall remain on leash and timeout shall be called while walking to split trees. Hunt time shall be called back in during shine time only. Otherwise, scored dog may be recast even if all remaining dogs are declared treed.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered that. Yeah, right.
Next sentence. Once a position has been scored, it becomes available again.
Yep. So we talked about scoring dog A. If I cut dog A loose again, let's say he was holding 100 strike. All the other dogs are declared struck. So all the positions are taking the best that when my dog opens up again, all I have is 25 there. You know, so whatever is available. You know, let's say you had let's say just one other dog is open. You know, is holding 75 strike. 50 would be available. So yeah, pretty simple.
Yeah. Next sentence: a dog declared struck after the recast received the next available strike position. A dog cannot be struck in over a position that is being held except when a dog holds his strike position for 1 hour. In that case, all strike positions will be open to other dogs.
Yeah, the first part of that we kind of covered there. The last part of it, when a dog holds his strike position for 1 hour, only then can a dog strike in above that dog there. So let's say dog A is out there, is holding the strike, and it doesn't matter what position, really. You know, you can't strike in for that position or over it unless that dog is holding that same position for an hour. So sometimes, you know, it's a little tough for judges sometimes to keep that in there. You have that note keeping box up there. And it's a good idea to kind of note some times when dogs are struck in and things like that for that purpose. Because if a dog holds strike position for a whole hour, then that position does become available and go in over top of him.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's always a good idea. It's usually the dog that's going to strike first at the beginning of the cast. A good idea to maybe notate what time those dogs are going to strike in.
And then F is another good one to know here.
Yeah. The strike position previously held by dogs on leash is not available until dog is recast. That's pretty straightforward. Until I pull my dog off a tree and cast him, then say I strike in for 100, we're scoring my tree. The other dogs in the cast aren't struck in. I pull him off the scoring situation. I'm about to cut him loose. You strike in before I cut him loose.
I get
You're
75.
going in for 75.
75.
I have to have this dog off the leash and competing before you can go in for 100.
100 is not going to be available until after you've turned your dog loose.
And it's important to notate, because I have had this pop up in some hunts before, is that if I use my option, say I'm going to keep my dog on leash, your dog's declared treed, then that means I'm forfeiting my strike points when those become available at that time.
That's right. Yeah.
And the last sentence of that section: multiple dogs may occupy fourth strike position. Just saying, the quarter is open. Once everything else is gone, quarter's lowest you can get. That's what you're going to get.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So, Rule 11. It's a kind of an in-depth rule. There's a lot there, but I think it's a good one to kind of go over a few times, rehash it a few times, maybe highlight some important things or underline them, and you can always refer to them at a later date. Yeah,
and I think it's really one. If you just go grab the rule book and read it word for word, each one of those, a lot of it's pretty self-explanatory, really.
Yeah. Yeah, so we were kind of getting low on time here. We have one more short topic I think we can fit in real quick, and it's as simple as it can be in a coon hunt. What coons can be scored and what coons can't. Obviously, we've
a dead one can, I know. We get that sometimes.
Yeah, we get some pretty funny instances, and there's probably some out there that aren't even going to be included today.
Well, the rule book doesn't say that. No, okay.
Yeah, I think if the rule book was as big as some people want, it would be as big as the Bible.
Exactly,
so
and bigger. Yeah.
So let's kind of get into it a little bit. Like you said, just recently had an email come in that a cast scored a dead coon in a night hunt, and they were kind of alluding to the fact that it doesn't say in our rule book that the coons have to be alive whenever you score them. And kind of going back through some old advisor columns, which we do when stuff's not in the rule book. Obviously, the advisor column, it's right there on the first page.
Yeah.
Advisor column is extension of the rule books. This is one that's been covered a lot in the past 20, 25 years.
And I think I have since I've been here, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Came up with that, live traps and some things like that. And so I'm sure I have.
Yeah. Actually, I pulled up some advisor column from 2017 and 2014. You know they're out there. Refer to them. We have all that stuff readily available for people to look through and kind of use common sense when you're out there in the woods.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I'm not sure when this actually used to be in the rule book is what it said in the advisor column. It used to be in the first one that you had to the hounds must be free cast in search of wild game. At some point it was removed, possibly just because of the kind of it's a given.
Yeah. I would hope so. You know, when you say we're talking about dead coons here, we're talking about coons that were dead that the dogs didn't track up and possibly catch. You know, obviously we have a rule for ones that they catch, and unfortunately that is something I guess that happens every now and then. You know, but that's different than you can't just go score on a
hunt that spot the night before. Maybe dispatch a coon and hang it up on a limb. Yeah. And I think that was the situation that happened here.
Yeah.
So probably a low-hanging coon that was pretty...
hey, quick little story right here about a dead coon here. So one night I'm in a 3-dog cast. Two guys I know real well. They'll know exactly, if they listen to this, they'll know the situation I'm talking about. We were neck and neck. And going right down towards the end of the hunt, we get on this track. All 3 dogs are running this track, and they're smoking it. Take it down in there, and I get the first tree on it. And I got to have a tree and a coon. To win this cast. And the one female's in the cast, she had a little bit of a lead on me at this time. Get there, and none of the other dogs are treeing, just mine. That's it. And I'm the only 5 minutes is up. We go in there, and the other 2 dogs are there on a dead coon, gnawing on a dead coon that somebody was during season. Somebody must have harvested and left it laying there. And, you know, so they're gnawing on this dead one. And it was like, wow, are you kidding me? The things that happen in night hunts.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to come across.
That was easier than it was going to be. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that's funny there. Basically, the rule book pertains to, there's just a few points where a coon can be plus, because there's not that many scenarios that can happen for a coon to be plus in a hunt. Obviously, if you refer to Rule 3, it'll tell you all about plus points. But the first thing, when dogs strike and tree a coon, and it's seen in, you find the coon during shine time in a tree.
Yep.
Straightforward. Second point where a dog can be plussed for a coon is whenever it's declared struck and or treed, and you find the coon in a place other than a tree. We're talking about a hole. A brush pile, maybe. There's some different scenarios there. That maybe a tile drain or something like that.
Or like we talked about, dog catches a coon on the ground.
Yep. And that's actually the last point 3 under there is if a dog catches a coon on the ground. All straightforward things. Here's some examples of times when you cannot plus a coon up, or accrue plus points on a scorecard from. Coon in a trap.
Yep.
Coon in a live trap.
Yep.
A cooning. You can't hunt in a coon enclosure or in a coon pen.
Right. That's right.
Makes sense. Got to be free cast. Coons in a cage, whether it be in someone's barn or a farm, maybe they're using them for different purposes. I know you've probably seen that before, but that's not one that you can have plus points on.
I have. I've seen that. And you'll hear of all kinds of different scenarios. I know you can't turn loose in a puppy pen that has a coon out there in the middle of in a cage. Doesn't work. Yeah.
Can't score plus points on dead coons hanging in trees. Pretty straightforward, or unless it's been freshly killed by the dogs caught on the ground there. And obviously you can't score on coons that you've cut loose for your dogs in front of the cast. I don't know
Yeah.
if people have done that, but it was referred to in the article, so I'm sure it's happened before.
Yeah, and can't walk along there and spot a coon sitting over there. Hey guys, we got one over here, and take the dogs over there and lead them up to the tree and let them tree.
Start
And,
sniffing
no,
them,
that doesn't work either.
Yeah, so that's actually what your article from 2017 was talking about. Somebody did that in a night hunt, I guess, trying to rack up some points. But
Yeah.
I guess the main thing to mention is to use your common sense out there, and the rules are pretty straightforward on how you can score plus points with a coon, and just read your rule book and use some common sense. when you're out
Yeah,
there in the woods.
going back to the trap, there could obviously be some situations where it's legit. It's obviously out in the wild, but allowing that will just open a can of worms that is no good. More cons than the pros, and guys planting coons in traps out there. So that's the reason. If they're treeing a trap on a trap, doesn't matter dead or alive, it doesn't matter. You can't score those.
So if some of you guys had plans for that, for Autumn Oaks, for running up a big score, sorry, we kind of ruined your plans there. Yeah. Well, we sure appreciate you listening. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this kind of rules-based podcast. We've talked a lot about different UKC programs and specific dogs the past a few Coonhound episodes. So I thought it was good to go and talk about the rules, because we really want to put a big emphasis on that with this podcast. Thanks for listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and to like and follow UKC Hunting Ops on Facebook and Instagram.